Hi everyone. So today I'm going to share with you a memory that I had from when I was in year 2. And my year 2 teacher, her name was Miss Murphy. And Miss Murphy every Friday would make us do a spelling test and a multiplication test. So on this morning we had already finished our spelling test and we were on to our multiplication test. And what would happen was that a student would come around with the multiplication test, and that student would make sure that they placed the paper in front of us face down. And that would, the reason for that was that so that we couldn't see the questions that were on the paper. We had to wait till Miss Murphy said begin, and then we could turn over and we would start our test. Because we were only given 2 minutes to complete the test, and no one student could get a head start. Now I remember sitting there on this day, and I remember getting my piece of paper, and I looked to the side, and I noticed that the boy sitting next to me, his name was Jackie Chai, and I wasn't good friends with Jackie Chai, but we used to talk in class. And he had turned over his paper and started to write down some answers, which was cheating. So I whispered to Jackie, I said, "Jackie, you can't start yet, the test hasn't started." And he looked back at me, and I knew that he knew the test hadn't started, but he was going to do it anyway. He wanted a head start. So a few seconds later, the teacher said, Miss Murphy said we could start, and we started the test, finished it. We hand our paper to another student who marks our paper, and we get a score out of 30. Now, Jackie Chai got second best in the class that day for his multiplication test. And before break time that morning, I remember having this discussion in my head, and the discussion was, do I just leave this situation and not tell a teacher, or do I go up to Mrs. Murphy and do I tell her what happened? And I had this voice that told me, go and tell Mrs. Murphy because this isn't right. So I remember before break time, I stood up, I walked over to Mrs. Murphy, and I was a quiet student in primary school, so this made me nervous going up to the teacher and sharing something. But I went up anyway, and I shared to Miss Murphy what I saw Jackie do, and that I saw him cheat. And she said, "Thanks for sharing that," asked me to sit down, and she brought Jackie Chai over and spoke to him. And they probably spoke for 2 minutes before Miss Murphy then asked me to stand back up and walk over to her. So I walked over to Mrs. Murphy, and I stood there, and she began to speak to me, and she said, the first words she said to me were, "How dare you? How dare you make up a story about another student to try and get him in trouble? How dare you?" And then I remember having this feeling like I couldn't even hear the words she was saying anymore. The words got all kind of jumbled, and I just remember feeling so embarrassed. I remember feeling very embarrassed, very ashamed, very sad, and also just very embarrassed that I had spoken up about what I thought was right, and I was not being understood. The teacher thought I was lying. So after about a minute of her lecturing me, I remember going to sit back down, and I looked over at Jackie, and Jackie gave me this grin like he knew exactly what had happened. So that story happened when I was about 8 years old, so 20 years ago. And memories are a funny thing because I don't really know why I still remember that story, and when I thought about why I remember that story, and I think it's because that story brings up very intense emotions. So those emotions of being embarrassed and humiliated for speaking up to the teacher and her not believing me. These are very strong emotions of anger and sadness and embarrassment. So when you think of memories that you have from your past, try and think about the strong emotions that are associated with that memory. It doesn't have to be a negative experience like I've shared. I also have very positive memories that have feelings of joy and happiness. But usually memories have these strong emotions, whether positive or negative. And I think that's why we remember them. What do you think?